Wait, did
Hello.
I not move you guys on the map? Confusion. I did. That's not the
Confusion.
map.
I'm playing Cinder!
Hey. Well, hello.
Hello, good day.
Hello.
Welcome to Legends of Methis, where the DM is currently very confused.
Yes, I am looking at Nyx being played as apparently is Lorcan today. Cinder is apparently Nyx today, and Lorcan is apparently
Just
Cinder
we
today.
I
decided to
want to
spice it
be
up a bit for the players.
post-creature.
I am still a DM though, so you're still screwed. So whilst our tech is being sorted, I want to welcome everybody. This is D&D Play 20. We are a group of incredible people that love D&D and tabletop RPGs, and who just want to have fun, want to chill out, and want to share that fun with all of you. And
Sometimes.
yeah, sometimes, not everybody, not all the time. We also do have an amazing community on Discord that you can join. And if you ever want to join any games, and sometimes people can't be in long-term campaigns, that's why we have things like Citizens of Phandalin, the trailer you just watched, so people can join in on the fun even if they can't commit to full-time campaign. Now, we do have a special announcement today because we have a sponsor for the month of October. Yes, it is technically not October yet, but we are announcing it early so everybody can get acquainted with them and can benefit from it as much as we are. And we want to bring them as many of you as we can as well. So it's a game store, cards, collectible games called Awesome, and there will be a discount code throughout the month of October for, is it for those who are a part of the community? Peter, do you want to enlighten?
Anyone starting October 1st can use the code D&D Play 20 and get 10% off all purchases, except those that are already discounted through other means, and they will have to pay shipping, of course.
There you go. So join us, join our community, and give Awesome a shout and check out their stuff because they're awesome, and the people that work there are awesome, and they are part of our community. So come and hang out with us. That being said, I am Mariana for the Bunda or the Kickbutt as I am today, and we are playing Legends of Methis, my homebrew campaign in my homebrew world, where these three
Freaks.
misfits are trying to do several things. Find a cure to a plague, prevent a demon invasion, potentially stop a war from happening, and save their friends. You know, easy stuff.
And live.
Yeah.
Oh, and I guess I should put everybody in the right order.
That's what I was trying to give you time to do.
There we go.
Alright. And now that that's been said, I will pass it on to whoever wants to do the recap. Well, actually, no. First, I need introductions. I am kind of out of it. So, who will go first? I will be mean, and I will get Lorcan to go first.
Oh, okay. So, I'm John. I play Lorcan Stronghammer. He is a Dragonborn.
Brass. You
Is there a
always.
bronze or a brass? No,
He's a brass.
It's a brass Dragonborn. Really fun. Really fire. Yes. All of them.
You do have 3 breath weapons, technically, yes.
Really down.
Yeah, it's repulsive breath, paralyzing breath, and fire.
Yes, it is.
No
And
fire,
he
bro.
loves getting on with his mate Nexus, and he's just having a good time. But he has learned giant.
Yeah, he's discovering that for some reason he knows Giant.
Yes.
Ooh.
We'll follow up with Cinder.
Hello, I am Peter. I play Cinder, the rotting corpse of a Firbolg who has patches of reptilian skin breaking through his own flesh, pustules of yellow pus, and big toothy smile. I play a cleric. No, I do not play a cleric in this game. I play a sorcerer, but he is divine. He may not look it, but he is divine. He looks undead.
Alright.
He's a divine undead.
So, that leaves us with Nix finally to introduce herself.
Hello, Nix, or well, Raza. It's the other way around. Nix plays Raza in this game. Raza playing Nix. Sometimes it feels like it. Lovable, yet sometimes a little bossy. Rock gnome / halfling from Port of Grace. So here's the thing. She is doing her best with what she has. She's kind of new to the whole saving people thing. She's a humble alchemist. So she's yeah, all she can do is try right now. To save Methis is one thing, but I think the baby steps, she's just trying to keep the group in one piece, basically. So, that's it for Nix for now. I'll see how it goes in the game.
Alright. So, I would ask if any of you are wanting to do a recap. Otherwise, I will do it. But remember that doing a successful and well done recap means that you'll get a reroll point. And for those of you out there who don't know what reroll points are, they are a way to force you to reroll any dice. They can make me reroll, they can reroll damage, attack rolls, ability checks, saving throws, D100s, anything. They can literally reroll anything.
I didn't know that. Yeah, reroll. That's
Any roll, yeah.
Yep.
You can use a reroll to
It's like
make
a master key.
reroll.
Gosh,
Yeah.
why didn't I know that properly?
No roll is safe.
You guys have. I don't know if you specifically have. So, does anybody want to do?
Nix volunteers as tribute.
Oh,
She goes,
sounds
"Oh,
like my
oh,
mic
oh,
is in
oh."
the next room. I'm so sorry. Okay, is that better? Can you hear me better now?
Actually,
Archie?
that's a little.
Can you hear Jonathan poorly though?
Yeah, I'm always sounding poorly though in this place. That's all.
Sing a few tunes, Jonathan.
We are sharing the same mic. That is the point. We live in the same house. We are in the same room. It's a gymnastics. It's a high DC of acrobatics to get this to
Sit it right in the middle.
to sit it in the middle and to not have echoes. So hope you guys bear with us. Shall we go on with the recap?
That's tribute. Yes, sure do it.
want
So, welcome back to Nix's Corner. It's been a while. According to what she has annotated, after a good night's rest, the group gathered around to discuss options. And one of those options at the back of Nix's mind was Dellen's lost flying invention. But she didn't know enough. She needed to know more. So she asked Lorcan about any sources of that could be traced to the like a library. Like there was like a library that she could go and research those. And him knowing his city well, he let her. It was agreed that they could go to the library and find out. So they did. They set off, and they met with a Erdak Beliezer. Sorry, Nyx is not good with Dragonborn names. She might have mangled that. She apologizes. So, who was the librarian in charge? And when she was asked about said lost invention, after browsing her magnificent catalog that she manifested in front of her with a flick of her hand, she informed them that they indeed have some sort of notes and knowledge on it, but it was in the restricted section of the library, and they didn't have clearance. So Nyx tried to formulate a plan to bypass this. I do believe the illusion was discovered that protected the restricted section, and with that she attempted to be clever and use invisibility to slip through undetected. However, the head librarian had a way of detecting magic being cast despite her not being aware of it. Like, Nyx thought that the librarian had to have some sort of line of sight to be able to see who cast what, but she didn't need that. So after 2 strikes of magic being used, they were told to leave. In the very limited time she had, Nyx examined what kind of defenses that she was up against, and it was just too complex to do in like 5 minutes. So she just decided to retreat and regroup with the rest. The idea was then of plan 2 was to have Cinder become a person of certain influence. And it was suggested that perhaps he should take the shape of Nyx's father, Anka Bakrath, a very pleasant and charming man, who was a newly appointed counselor. And it worked. Cinder played his part well. It got them through the red tape, got them through to the vault, but they were warned still by the librarian that despite the defenses being lowered, that the Guardian was still active. And when they asked her about who the Guardian, she had no idea, because she didn't have the clearance to go down there. And so, the group proceeded deep into the restricted section, Harry Potter style, and they came across a very dilapidated repository of knowledge. However, the main attraction was this prominent and foreboding statue that was watching their every move. A statue that resembled a humanoid-like lion. And with Nexus being the first to proceed, he was the first one to suffer the punishment of the Giant Sphinx. Nyx quickly decided that honesty was the best policy, decided to put herself forward as a candidate for the trial to save Nexus. And the Giant Sphinx sort of agreed, not really. It threw them all into a interplanar labyrinth where each person needed to find their own way through the trial. Nyx, after some trial and error, same with Lorcan, they've managed to find each other. They had no idea what happened to Cinder, but Cinder, it turns out, had the luck of the gods on his side. He ended up finding them soon enough. Through trial and error. And they came across a room that had like a net almost set up in a hammock style, and they found clothes on a nearby table, and a letter that said, "The exit you think of might not always be the right one." And Nyx was like, the gears were like, so she's thinking, okay, so not the obvious way out. Before they had met up with Cinder, she had discovered a trap door. But then she came back in and she's like, what's under this all these materials in the ground? I think that was like, and she moved that and they had turned out to be a chest that seemed to have like a bottom that opened out. So she thought that was the least obvious way of leaving. So she led them through it in an unorthodox way to keep them all together. She suggested they all do the buddy system and hop in the bag of holding. Lorcan was a little trepidatious. He thought, why don't we just hold hands? Maybe it achieves the same thing. She was a little bit more insistent because she didn't really think that would work. Then again, who knows how Sphinx's labyrinths work? Nyx was just operating on what she knew and what she had learnt very recently. And so they all managed to go through. Cinder had to be forcibly persuaded to go in the bag. Thank you, Lorcan. And that would have been a little harder to do by Nyx herself. And Nyx led them through to the other side. She managed to take them a little bit into the labyrinth since she had a little bit more speed up her sleeves since she had drank one of her elixirs that upped her movement speed a little quicker. But then she let them out because she needed their help this side because they were not out of the woods or the labyrinth yet until they came across a very curious room with an altar and what seemed to have been bedrolls on the side.
Probably the most.
And Nyx was getting all
in a while.
Yeah, and Nyx was getting all kinds of bad vibes about this role. Like she was very suspicious of this. But she'd been suspicious of the labyrinth the whole time. To be fair, that's how her mind works. And before she could examine said altar, Cinder ran forward and lied down on the. Don't look at me like that, Peter. You know what you did. You did, Cinder. And lie down on the altar. And lo and behold, it was rife with magic. I believe Nyx, before Cinder had jumped on, it was rife with abjuration and magic. There was, I think, another magic that was there that Nyx has forgotten. It's on the tip of her tongue. But either way, it was enchanted, and Cinder disappeared straight through. And with little choice, their companions decided to follow. And they have been transported somewhere magical, full of happiness and, good times, she hopes. And that's where we left it.
Thank you very much. I just want to test something real quick. Can you guys hear us okay?
You say that, but can you hear us actually, or do I need to actually? But hey, what can you do?
Hello?
I think Belvedere says it's great now. They can hear you.
Okay.
That was ages ago.
Oh, well, I wasn't looking. I was recap.
Peter, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Like, if we asked, can you guys hear us both fine? And everybody went silent. So I'm like,
I was trying to mess with you.
oh. Okay, so minus inspiration to Cinder. Gotcha. Actually, why are cards not visible? Visible point.
Why not?
No, the deck. Alright. So I've given Nyx a reroll for recap. However,
Huzzah.
there's one very key thing that was missed, which was the goal of the trial wasn't just to find your way out. It was to find each other in your way.
But we didn't know that.
Yes, you did. I said it multiple times.
Oh, bad.
Did the characters know that was the goal?
Yeah,
We
that
knew.
the voice, the Sphinx told you, find each other and end your way out.
We also
Yes, I remember that.
Peter, you trying to regain your inspiration?
No, I do remember it. I'm not kissing up or anything. Let me wipe this brown stuff off my nose.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Alright.
I'm good.
Okay. So,
Go.
What? What did I miss? Not really. Okay. So, Morgan, you're gonna have to move. So you guys are gonna have to just bear with Lorcan a little bit, but for now I'll continue because we're gonna start with Cinder. Cinder was the one that trusted the most and was the one that decided to try and lay on the altar and fall through the portal.
Yes.
So, let's see what Cinder is. So,
Did I die? Wait, I thought you said I went back. Oh, back to there. Oh, I'm gonna die.
so
I don't think so.
Hello, great one.
you see, you pop back and you see the Gyno Sphinx looking down at you with a semblance of a smile on their face.
Do I get my 3 wishes now?
Do you say that?
No, but I will say, oh, hello.
Hello?
You really are quite the handsome Sphinx.
Boy, flattery. We must get you in.
I wish.
I admire your trust in my ability.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'm a little bit envious that you're so handsome because, as you can see, I'm just. My good looks have flown away into the wind. All they are is dust scattered on the wind. Because you see, I'm infected by this awful disease, and I don't know how to save my own life.
I can understand your frustration. Oh, we lost somebody.
Lorcan's gone. Bye bye.
Just 1 second, everybody.
Hey, look at that. How did I know which one would disconnect?
Yes, so, she continues. I understand your frustration, but have trust that it is only a matter of time before you get what is warranted. You clearly trust in those that have the power to protect you. It will
Well,
come.
I must say, my own God just kind of skipped town on me.
Gods don't do that. They might feel beyond your reach, but they'd never truly abandon you. But I'm proud of it. We have a bit of time before anyone else joins us. Tell me, would you like to free your friend? She's referring to Nexus, who's in
Nexus.
the hourglass.
Okay, just for a reminder, above table was Nexus in the maze too.
No,
No.
Nexus
Darn.
was kept. Nexus was kept as a what you guys needed to say.
And a
You had 5 minutes
Hourglass.
because he
Why not?
was as insurance as he was stuck in the hour.
Well, I suppose Nyx is kind of helpful. Yeah. Okay, she's very helpful. But her taste in mates is not really that great. But Lorcan, he drinks a little bit too much. But you know what? Yeah, I guess. They're good companions.
Very well. Let's have your friends join us before the final.
Whoa! Final test?
And as you say that, Nix and Larkin.
Oh, look,
You
Lorcan
can.
just comes back.
It was all perfectly timed. I don't know why you.
I.
Can't see you though.
Yeah, you've got your thing off. Your little thingy off.
Put your thing on.
Oh, it's dark.
Ah! Just popped out of nowhere.
He was there the whole time. I don't know what you done.
I.
Hi.
Welcome back.
So,
We're
as
also back.
as Lorcan and Nix pop on each side of you, looking at the Sphinx. Time is still passing, and Nix is still in the hourglass.
Yeah, he can stay there. So, great and mighty Sphinx, what is your name?
Why are we asking for its name? Can we please have Nexus back?
No,
Yeah,
no,
Nix
no.
is. Nix is
No.
looking up at Cinder confused.
You should always address a
Fine.
mighty person by their name. It's only polite. We don't want to be rude.
My name matters not. I have one question.
Oh.
Your friend has already given the answer. And with that, their eyes flare, and Cinder gets silent.
So now what answer did you give?
And it turns. It turns to both of you. Would you rather have your friend back, or whatever you came here to see?
She looks at. She's like glares at Cinder. Doesn't know what he said.
Why would we
Why did I need to pay?
Hold on, wait. You would rather think that we would want a book over my best mate? No, my best mate. Always.
She looks at the.
Even
thing
if
and
the
she
book
goes,
you may search for could give you the answers to anything.
Hand the book. Now,
Now you, Lorcan, gets silent. Lorcan already gave his answer.
Nix looks at this thing. There is no bit of knowledge. There's not a scrap of information or secret that I would trade over that man's life. She looks towards Methis. Please return him like you promised.
And again, their eyes flash. You all stop being silent.
Ah, yep.
And Nexus is
Oh.
right next to Nix. Nexus is like,
Are you okay?
You have a bit of sand on you.
Yes.
Sid,
She
I was
pulls out-
surprised Cinder chose to save me too.
He did? Oh. Weirdo.
And Nix pulls out her little
Wait, I thought we were
sprays them down.
silenced.
It's
You're not silenced
it's
anymore.
over.
Oh,
Nix sprays Nexus to clean off the sand, if there's any sand on him.
Why are you spraying him to clean off sand? With what? Water?
No, it's I told you, it's my little twirl that does prestidigitation. It's just keeps. She sprays Lorcan in the face.
Yes, your circle portal thing.
Cinder is going to whisper under his breath like this and go, reapply, reapply. And cast prestidigitation to put the sand back.
But it's not working. She like looks at her little. She doesn't know that it's he's casting
So
it.
he's doing it.
looks at it.
You sure it's not broken?
The Sphinx looks at it and says, "Two trials have been met. Let's see what happens with the last."
Wait, that was the trial?
She's blinking. She's like,
I thought.
she understands.
Well, we got.
Oh! Oh! We're gonna die up in here.
So let me show
What do we see?
everybody what it looks like.
Oh, they're
Is that a
adorable.
baby?
It is kind of adorable.
It is kind of adorable. Wait till you guys know what it is.
I don't want to know. It's a rag with eyes.
Yeah.
As you see,
Paper snake.
papers and books become these
Oh.
little critters.
What a guess.
They're gonna paper cut us.
So what do? They seem to be, going about their business. Paying no attention.
Nyx will like hold up a hand and examine one like really closely.
Sure. Give me a Arcana, Nature, or History check. I'm fine.
Let us do Arcana, and she can guide us stuff, right? Is that she can guide us stuff on?
Yeah. At the minute, yeah.
Okay,
At the
cool.
minute, yeah.
Dylan, guide you then. Nyx. Let's see. Let's do a guidance. Okay. That's not terrible. 13, 16. It's a terrible roll on the side. Feels like a
Alright.
5.
You recognize these creatures. They are bookworms.
I quite like that. Sorry.
Do they penetrate flesh? That's what I need to know, because I don't have a lot of flesh left.
You know that they are surprisingly damaging, but surprisingly peaceful.
I just want to suggest that you never use the word penetrate again.
Nexus, go pet one.
Nyx holds up again. She holds up her hand higher. She goes, they're the bookworms. They're peaceful. I mean, they can harm, but they're not
They just look like
aggressive
snakes.
creatures.
Paper snakes.
I think we should handle them with care.
Be a good time for me to thunderbolt jump.
Lightning through crabs.
Thunderbolt
So,
jump this
what are
way.
you guys doing?
I'm Do they have writing on their? They're made of paper, right? They have writing?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to approach the one closest to me on the right and see if I can kind of weave back and forth with it and read the text. I like
What language do you
wiggle my tongue to look like a snake.
What languages do you speak?
It says all. No. Common, speech of beast and leaf, and Sylvan.
As you're looking at the glyph in which the script is written on it, you don't recognize it.
Well, let me ask you a question. If these are made of paper, paper is made of trees, trees grow leaves, so I should be able to speak to this thing.
I like the way he's going though.
I like it, but it does specify what language it is.
Okay, it was worth a shot.
They are
The
monstrosities.
presence.
No.
The next attempt to decipher what it says as well.
What language did you
it's
speak?
also got. She reads all kinds of languages, but she understands them all. It's different. Common, Elvish, Gnomish, and Halfling.
You don't recognize it?
Can she try and attempt to see if it's like any script that? I don't know how she would do that. To be fair, no. She doesn't know the language. She tell her it's ancient or current. She wouldn't know.
Is Larkin trying to read?
Yeah, Lorcan will try and read because he's like, why is everyone staring at the paper?
Yeah, as Larkin looks, this is the script you've known your whole life.
Draconic.
Do I know what it says?
It's draconic. It's different texts. Text.
Falcon, do you understand that? She like points to.
Yes, it's normal writing, is it not?
No. She
What do
looks
you mean, no?
Not for me, but
It's
is
normal
it?
writing here.
Also, it's draconic then. She.
Is that what they call it? Yeah, it's draconic.
Yeah, you know the name of your language.
Well, to me, it's my common language.
They might have their own word for it, like ha ta ta or something.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I wish there was a word for it. I don't actually know.
Yeah, as you do you say anything in draconic, or do you just explain that it's draconic?
You can read it.
Can I ask you what it to let us read it?
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask you to let us read it.
Okay. As you talk to it, you see that it cocks its head at you,
Oh.
and it unfolds itself into the book that it came from,
Oh.
and it hovers to your hand.
Do I? What book is it?
It's a book about council law.
Just a random rubbish book then, gotcha.
Not a random rubbish book. It's clearly a book of the restriction.
To Lorcan, it's a random rubbish book.
It's not really anything important to me. So I'll be like, okay, and where do you go in this section?
As it unravels itself again into the worm, it cocks its head, not understanding what you meant.
Oh, shelf.
When you say shelf, it hovers with like a paper plane, and it goes onto a shelf.
Does it turn back into the book though? Or?
No,
Oh.
just hovers there, looking at you, walking inside.
Guys, help! I don't know what to tell it to do.
So, just to clarify, it turned back into a book when he reached for it?
When he
Or-
asked if he could read.
When he asked. But then when he stopped, it just turned back into a...
Which book are we after again? Next, do we know?
I do know the title, but it will have to pertain to Dylan's flying ship.
So I'll turn to the paper worm.
Mhm.
I know. Do any of you have anything about a flying ship?
You see, they all look at each other, look back at you, off their heads.
I don't think they're one of these books. Can we
Maybe we should...
have a look around the library?
Great Sphinx, can you give me the ability to understand the writing in all of these books?
Who?
That is not the point of this
Nix looks to the Sphinx. I'm sorry, what is the point of this trial? Or is that part of the trial?
What is the point of the trial? Or is that part of the trial for me now?
That is probably part of the trial.
I want to see what you can do to do.
Well,
There's a fine. Oh,
I'm guessing that the snakes have the information we seek written upon them. So if somebody were to actually use his ability to understand a language that the rest of us do not understand, well, then maybe we can write down what he reads.
Nexus, help me out here. Shall we each
Yeah,
ask,
Nick's looked at-
ask a word? Well,
I don't know. They
Because-
said they don't know anything about a flying ship. Like,
I think we
that
should
they
just
know
try-
of. Maybe it's not a ship, but let's see if we can read them.
Yeah, they seem to respond to when you
This
say they
one
want
I
to
know
read
is
them.
about council law. So it's this one next to me, is it? On the map?
it was on the right.
On the right. Yeah, this one.
Yeah. This one was now on the shelf.
Yeah. And I'll move over towards this one and say, would I be able to?
As you take a step closer to the shelf,
Yep.
they all turn and their eyes glow red.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Ooh. It's alright. Could I see?
They're still with eyes red.
Can I back up a step?
When you back up a step, oh, I'm back up.
Okay.
Can Nick pick
Stick
up
under its
the
chin.
snake?
No,
Just a heads up to my fellow players. You have about 3 minutes before I do a Pete thing, so...
Oh.
Oh boy,
Well,
another
I'll,
hourglass situation. Got it.
I'll gesture
can
to
Nick
this
at-
one.
Which one? You're pointing at your screen? I don't see your screen.
I'll gesture to this one. Oh, wait,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Nick's is
and
gonna
I'll
pick
ask
that one
it
up.
if
Yeah,
I'm
let him do
able
his
to
thing.
read it from
Yeah.
it. And
Sure.
what is that one?
That one is on the history and founding of Caroline.
History and Foundation, Caroline.
The history and founding of Caroline.
And where do you belong, little one?
What's it said again?
Say shelf again.
Bookshelf.
Oh, I should. Yeah. what was
As
it
you
on
do that, again, it unfurls and flies. And
So that one's law, and that one's history.
there? Okay. So far so good.
Aye. If I take a step closer to the others, will they get red-eyed as well? I will talk to this one. Would you be able to come over, little one?
again, it unfurls into a book that slowly hovers.
Just gotta read them all, it's fine. Yeah, and that one is. Or can I not read it from here?
That one is on the glyphs that first catch your eye mention the pilgrimage of the gods to the Isle of Knot.
Religious? About pilgrimages.
How did they travel?
Question, it doesn't say it's in this book, I don't think.
It does. You guys know it is known that when someone becomes a god in Methis, they do a pilgrimage. That's what.
Oh, it's the god pilgrimage, not
Yes.
people pilgrimage.
No.
Gotcha.
Is the god pilgrimage to the Isle of Knot.
And which bookcase are you from? Ooh, where did that go?
All the way back.
I need to contact Eric.
All the way back there.
Why?
Because he solves puzzles instantly. The dude is a genius. History, lore, and what was that last one?
Religion.
It was religion.
History, lore,
Yeah,
religion.
now I need to know which sections they are as well. Just law, history, religion. Can I do it to each of them and just find out which section
Yeah.
is which.
So
Will
if
it
you
say at
repeat-
a time to?
No, it's okay. If you repeat the process,
Yeah.
you can find out that this one that I'm going to move now is on cultures,
Yeah.
the different countries of the land.
Yeah.
This one is on diplomacy,
Diploma.
and this one is on economics. Couldn't say the word even though I was trying to read it.
Well, honestly, I don't think any of these are what we wanted. But there are 2 missing. Where are those ones? Are there any more of you little paperwork? Are there any answers?
They've never spoken to you.
Well, I know. No gestures, no nothing.
He's trying to get a reaction from them, I guess.
They look at each other. And they don't answer. They've only ever really answered to you when you ask one another.
So I'll ask this one directly.
It cocks its head at you and doesn't move.
So
Asks questions.
Just doesn't know.
only one vowel. That doesn't give us a lot to work with here.
But there's 2 cases without any paperwork.
I'm going to turn around and start digging through the books on this shelf closest to us.
Oh no.
As you touch a book on the shelf,
Whoa!
Okay.
Larkin.
it transforms.
Ah, so who's this little one then? Could I see yours?
Again, same ritual happens as it goes into your hand. And you see that it's on history.
Again?
2 H's.
What? History of...
History of the lands. This one seems to be on the ferry.
Ah. And I'm just going to ask them if they would allow me to go over towards this bookcase. Do I get any response from any of them?
Nope.
And I'll take another couple of steps towards that way.
Everyone's eyes go red.
And I'm back.
Cinder.
Sorry, what?
She was just commending Cinder for...
Thank you. I was just being my normal reckless self.
Aye. Definitely.
Can I just say, I love what you're doing, but you're overcomplicating.
Aye.
Yes.
All right. Has it been 3 minutes?
Oh yeah.
That's fine, my house.
All right. First thing I'm going to do is go to these books and start looking at the
Alright.
titles.
Everyone's eyes turn red, and they all stand at attention as you move. But you're not approaching any of them. So for now, they're just watching.
Huh.
I'll just kind of inch my way, like I'm acting like this looks interesting, and I'm just kind of covertly making my way around the bookshelf toward the other one. And then I turn to Larkin and I wink and I say, come on, because I can't read anything. Ooh, that's a nice title.
And will follow. Carefully.
Ooh, I'm a bit too close to this one. I gotta back up a little bit. Oh, that's better. Oh, look, another bookshelf.
Nick is looking at the other worms to see how they react when moving slowly towards the shelves.
As you start to approach the shelf, they all start to move forward in their shelf.
Oh.
Calm down, everybody. Are you gonna be like a problem? Because I've faced plenty of problems. I really don't want to face one now. And I will prestidigitate black flames in my hand, in my palm, and say, I really don't want any problems. You know? It's not real flame, but
Distinctly cut it out. Look at him.
well, I figured.
Larkin, give me a perception check.
Oh no. Never good.
Oh boy. I will roll initiative.
I need, depending, let's see. Always
Is this-
you have rerolls, don't forget that.
Yeah.
He was looking so desperate, I even felt bad.
Yeah, I will use a reroll. Because I got a 4. And I don't want a 4.
No one wants the 4 for the...
Oh, actually, no, it would have been a 3 because I don't have any modifier. Investigation, or is it?
No,
No,
perception.
perception. Oh, no, I haven't.
Perception.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's a nat 1.
All right, it's time.
Great.
Party time. Next is
And I can't re-roll that one. Wait, I've got inspiration.
Go for it.
Can he turn our crown upside down?
14! So 15 altogether.
15. Alright.
Two.
That's enough for you to, as you and Cinder are approaching, and Cinder takes a moment to be like, I don't want any trouble. You look at the titles of the books. You have heard of this. That this library had a section on dark magic, on demons, devils, etc. And you see that they are very on edge as Cinder is approaching.
Ah. Bad stuff that we're not supposed to go near?
You can roll me an insight.
Yeah. I am curious on that. I will roll that. But I'll mention Cinder. These titles are all bad stuff like demons, dark magic and things. And he's gonna enjoy that though. It's like why did I even say that? No.
That latest roll was for a reason. I'll let you know if it actually
I
happens.
got a 18 insight.
Yeah, definitely that's the one shelf they don't want you to
Yeah,
go.
no, we're not going there, Cinder. Is there
Too late.
Is there a little worm?
Too late? What happened?
Cinder leaps up on top of that bookshelf and says, King of the world, tree huggers!
Right, and I grab him down. Strength roll, was it, to drag him off the shelf?
Yeah, I got the fire! Initiative window just
is-
came up.
Yeah, so what does Nick see when Cinder jumps up because King on the shelf?
Morgan saying like, "This is dark magic. We're staying away," and Cinder leaps off, and they ready to jump into action.
And I drag him off the shelf.
Hey!
I need you to do me a dex save to see how quickly you do this. If it's before or after the first one reaches you.
Oh, great! Stop jumping off the table. Dex.
They're made of paper. All we need is flame.
7. You've got
And
stuff.
I'm re-rolling. I'm using all my re-rolls because I didn't know.
can, yeah. After Lorcan's done rolling, can Nick try
9?
something?
How's a 9 sound?
What does it want?
I was saying, if when Lorcan's done rolling, can Nyx try something? If she has
As
got
a
the shit,
reaction?
Not a reaction, I guess. She would have been
Then
I should have said she was holding something, but
He was right next to him and trying to prevent him from doing anything stupid. So I gave him a chance to try.
I was just asking for a peace of mind.
You are the weakest link.
So,
How is a 9?
not quick enough.
Not quick enough? Oh, bugger. How about I knock him off there with an attack? Would that not be quick enough either?
You don't have an attack.
It was just to see, she gave you the dex to see how quick you would be on the
I
outside.
know.
Quick enough.
So, everybody roll to do.
Still gonna drag him off the shelf.
I'm still gonna drag him off and beat him up.
We'll get to that. See how bad this goes.
Did anything come out of the shelf?
I'll show you what's gonna come out of this shelf.
You're gonna get shelved in a minute.
Ooh, that's nice. Oh, I got 2 rolls.
Hey, she's faster than some of them. That's nice.
2 21s for my initiative. Oh! I got a 21.
Oh,
Not
one
bad
got a
from that
nat
one.
20.
And I'm gonna roll.
Did you move the numbers in the board?
I wasn't done rolling.
Not done rolling!
No need to raise your voice, DM.
What is Nick's? I've added Nick's turn, so please put your number in.
Okay, now that. Thank you.
The first one to move is actually this one. So, we can move and
Cinder loses an arm. Please.
no, it doesn't have to. They're coming right
Oh, great.
there. The Sphinx doesn't do anything for now.
Oh, for now.
It's working.
He's gonna drag Cinder off.
Alright.
Do I have to do an attack roll to grab him?
You can try to grapple him. It's athletics versus acrobatics.
It's more I just want to grab his leg and drag him off the shelf.
You can try to grab him.
Grab him. So...
You roll athletics, Cinder can roll acrobatics or
He's got to beat a 17.
I have to roll...
Athletics.
Have to.
the grappler has to use athletics. Do you have a grapple feat or something like that?
I...
No, you have tap
No,
roll.
I can... Yeah.
Yes, so Cinder tiptoes on top of the bookshelf.
Get out.
You can't. But you've got 2 attacks, right? So you can try to grapple with your second attack.
Yeah, can I actually this time, like, do a running jump and try and rugby tackle him off it?
So 2 of us will be on the shelf.
Give me
Like, he's
an
wound me up.
give me an unarmed strike,
Unarmed.
and then we'll see from there.
Unarmed. It's basically just another attack.
Yeah, but it's an unarmed strike.
I-
You should have that as an option.
Run,
I think
run.
you can only.
Go ahead.
No, I think you could technically only do. If you have multi-attack on the grapple, use one of that to grapple.
Alright, is it?
But he's not trying to grapple, he's trying to tackle him. Like a shot.
Oh, you're actually attacking. You're rugby tackling him. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm rugby tackling him now. Yeah.
Go
Off
on.
the shelf.
Okay. Okay.
Dive, dive, fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man.
You alright?
Quite nice. 5 plus 7. 12. 12.
What's your AC in here?
More than 12.
I don't know. What is my AC? 15.
Alright, give me a dexterity saving throw with advantage.
Ooh, advantage, because she loves me.
No, it's because you have a giant person coming at you. who's just
20.
Yeah, he just goes whoop, and you kind of vault over
Tippy-toe, tippy-toe.
the bookshelf.
He's really pissing me off.
You are now prone, and
Cinder, just you wait till I get up.
Cinder. Unless you have a bonus action, sorry.
I'm fine now.
Well, it would have given you advantage.
Yeah.
Your giant smite.
On strength checks and strength saves.
Cinder, what are you doing?
Nat 1 to set the books on fire.
Alright,
Excuse me?
so what happened?
The books on the case I'm standing on, I was going to set on fire with.
As you blow down, is this supposed to be firebolt?
Yeah.
As you blow down a black flame firebolt towards the books, there's this blackness that spreads from the bookshelf and absorbs the flame and shoots it back at you. Full damage.
I don't want to.
Please tell me it like knocks him off and like throws him about 20 feet.
13.
Well, that's the damage you take.
I'm resistant to all damage.
Uh-huh.
Mentally
Anything else?
resistant.
Anything else for Cinda?
Yeah. Cinder is gonna disappear.
How is it now?
I am totally gonna disappear. So you may move me to
Let me
the
have a
GM
look.
layer. And I will uncheck my use of hidden step.
Ah,
Or check my use of. It is.
okay. At the end of your turn, you become visible again. So where are you?
End of my next turn.
No. The Sphinx did a legendary action to cast a spell, and cast a spell magic on you. It has true sight. Where are you?
Well, what's my movement here? 30 feet.
What?
I'm going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30.
Okay.
Huh. I think I'm still invisible, though.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I'm
so
going to be dancing around, putting on a show. And
all of you see that as Cinder went invisible, you disappeared for a second, and the Gynosphinx's eyes flare once again, Legendary action, cast a spell. Cast the spell magic on Cinder.
I'm like,
As Cinder left without taking any books, you all see as they all return to their normal form.
see, I just beat them all.
Yeah, the red eyes and the attack positions, they're all back to normal.
So
Wow.
essentially, I just won that battle.
You scared everybody to death, you mean? So, what is Nyx going to do?
Well, have the bookworms stood down?
They're not with red eyes, and they're wiggling calmly again.
Okay. Sorry, so Cinder's off the shelf and hasn't done anything. Okay, so if that's the case, then Nyx is not gonna not do much. Just gonna wave Cinder over, she's like, "Just come back."
Cinder's like, you can't see me.
Yeah, but she doesn't need to see you to speak to you. Cinder's
Yeah, you
like-
can't see him.
Yeah,
He's
you
not-
can see me. I just think I'm still
because you got the
invisible.
spell.
Yeah.
But also saying that even if she couldn't, she doesn't need to see you to speak to you. She goes, Cinder, we can all see you. Come back here.
What?
So
What?
waves.
Oh man!
Cinder, don't do that. Don't antagonize them. Come back.
Well, now we know what's in that bookshelf.
Forbidden knowledge. Because she's like, where's it over?
That was fun, wasn't it? I say to the Sphinx.
Sphinx is still invisible.
Okay.
So, Lorcan,
Yes.
what are you up to?
Lorcan's trying to get back on his feet after face planting the floor. And he's still furious with Cinder. And he's still gonna go over and get him. But I don't think I can reach him anyway.
Okay. In the meantime, Nexus kind of goes, let me actually do it real quick. Intelligence
Yeah.
check, please. He goes, it is going to be really stupid, but why don't we just ask them what we want is? It may not be an airship like Larkin said, but why don't we just ask them?
Ask them then.
What's the fun in that?
Okay,
Yeah,
next
it's
goes,
worth a try.
what are we looking for?
Invent Dellen's inventions. Just inventions to keep it simple.
Do you have a list of Dylan's inventions or just inventions?
Word for word.
And he like looks at one of them, doesn't react. He looks at like all of them, repeating the same question in turn. None of them react. And then he goes, what about you? Under the big lion.
Under the big
When
line.
he says, yeah, it's a lion. When he says that,
What sort of perception check do you call that?
one appears and touches with its tail.
Well, not to me.
Towards Nexus. Towards Nexus. And, you know, falls on his hands and he goes, what are you? Oh, wait, you don't understand the draconic.
No.
You see that Nexus is kind of nervous and he goes, yeah, so it's actually called Dylan's Inventions. And what do you want?
Anything on the flying ship?
Eh, Lorcan!
What?
You know that he always struggled reading stuff out loud?
You can read out loud, lads. You know you can. It's only to Nick.
Nix looks at Nexus.
So as Nexus starts reading stuff from like the contents page, right? Nix, you start to pick up that he mispronounces certain words, or he says a different word than what would make sense there, but that is a similar sound to it.
You're doing great.
But eventually there is one on transport. There's a section on transport inventions.
Ooh.
She goes, yeah, that. Read more about it. She like called some.
Okay, so he goes through and you get to a page with schematics and some text. And I hope everybody's ready to write down.
Nope. Copy and paste. While she's doing that, I would like to ask the Sphinx my own test question. Mr. Sphinx, what is my dog's favorite breakfast?
Oh.
Any meat given to him by you.
If you cannot answer this question, you have failed the test.
I have answered your question, whether you know it to be true or not.
The answer is my dog's favorite breakfast is poached eggs.
Roll initiative.
That was
you
my...
see the hint of a smile. So, for a second, back to the skiff. So you have, it is called Astral Skiff. And the text goes, and for some reason it's not letting me show you because it never works for me. One of the only failures of the God of Invention was considered to be the one with the most potential for expansion across the world of Methis. The astral skip, as it was called by its creator, was a construct that allowed, in theory, whoever manned it alongside an elemental imprisoned at its core to roam out of the atmosphere of our own planet and continent across to the stars, to cross the vast openness that it lives between us, our 2 moons, and the 5 neighboring planets. However, every skiff that was built and or modified was brought down by an invisible barrier similar make to that of the Isle of Knot, which brought about the question that everyone posed to Delin as to why would he want to explore the planets and the moons when he could not explore an island a few hundred miles from his own birthplace, and therefore the program continuing to build and improve such ship was canceled. The last remaining prototype that was kept before trial was said to be buried in the deep wastes, the deep sandy wastes to the north.
Great. Just great. We need the ship to get to the wastes, but the ship is in the wastes.
Sorry, Cindy.
I'm gonna die. That's all there is to it. You can name the ship Cinder's Fate. Because, hey,
You have okay. Just so a heads up, I don't know if this is in character or if this is Peter.
it's in character.
Okay, we're fine. Because you know you have 5 weeks still.
It was 5 weeks 2 months ago.
Yeah, but it's only been 3 in-game days.
You know what we need? We need a teleport circle. Nix,
You know what
can't
part
you
that is?
like put some stones in a circle and I don't know, make us go somewhere useful?
My knowledge on teleportation is very limited. I barely scratched the surface of such.
Would you be able to build a boat? A flying boat?
It would probably take me as long to build it, if not more, than it would take this travel.
How?
And with instructions?
Okay,
But
I'm not an inventor. I'm not a builder. I don't tinker. But it seems to me that if we could contain the breath of Nexus within a giant balloon, it would be enough hot air to float and carry us to where we got to go. You know, I'm a thinker.
Balloon's not a bad shout.
As you
Did
say
you
that,
say-
Nexus flicks through the pages, and he shows everyone a schematic similar
I
to
was
what
I was
Cindy
about
just
to
described.
ask about that. Yeah, I was literally about to say.
So, if
It's
we
the
build one
schematics.
of those, we could name it Nexus Breath.
Larkin, roll me a history check.
Oh. Oh. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah.
And no.
Oh. Dirty 20.
And an 18. You both, despite your terrible history, you both remember this. There is one of the balloons on display in the inner circle of the city.
Display doesn't mean functional.
No, but you know, it's meant to be one of them.
But I do remember that they're not very good at steering.
Well, we have Nexus, so we got all the hot air we need, right? So,
You do more fire than I do. I do fire and ice.
I'm not talking about fire. I'm talking about your breath. It might stink, but you got enough hot air inside you to carry us anywhere. All we got to do is put your lips on the end of the balloon and you blow.
I think there's more to it than that, but I think it's a good idea. What do you think, Nix? There's
Can
one
Nix
of them
look up-
inside the inner circle.
Can Nix look at the schematic and see if it's possible to build this in time? The
And can
complexity
you-
of it.
Yeah. Roll me a. Don't forget it's in Draconic, but roll.
She'll get
me-
Nexus or look into like translate.
Build or repair.
What tools are you proficient in?
Because this would be selling.
Alchemist supplies, smith tools, thieves tools, tinker tools. And she has 1 second. Let me check something. Magical tinker something here that. Yeah, that's what she's proficient with.
So
Oh, it's a tool
Give me-
expertise.
give me a Tinker's Tools check.
Okay. So, with that actually goes in hand with what I was just looking for. So, just to let the DM know, and when Nyx uses like a tool she's proficient with, she has tool expertise. So it doubles the proficiency for the check. I'll just put it up there. And I'll do a Tinker's Tools as well. She should definitely pull out her tools and try and see what she can find out. I might take these tools.
I'm proficient in cook's utensils and herbalism, so like, could I like boil water to create steam that rises up and fills the balloon?
Let's see what Nyx rolls first.
It wasn't coming out, but now I have a. So what's that going?
You are very low. I can barely hear you, darling.
I thought you said the volume was fine before. So,
It's because you're whispering now.
I don't know.
Ooh.
Right. So it probably take you about a month to build one of
A
these
month?
things.
She thought
But
But I just said there's one in a museum.
if there is already one built that you only need to repair, it could take you as little as a day, depending on the state of it.
That means we're doing a heist.
Yes! I always wanted to do a
Just
heist.
so you're aware, it's on display in the central square of the innermost council wall.
That's...
Heist.
He's like, I don't care. Hi.
Nyx, can we please do a heist? Please, I want to do a heist. Consider it my last wish.
Yeah, he only lives once. You can have it as his death wish as well.
How-
When I catch up to him, I'm gonna murder him.
How do you propose we do this? I doubt if it's easy to access. Is it?
Yeah. But let's hope we can contact some people.
Well, I can disguise myself and look like a worker.
You see next is good. Oh, or we can hope my mom wins the tournament and borrow it to make like a parade with her. But then we just go somewhere else.
I really don't want to tick off your mom.
Ah, she's got wings. We can throw her over the edge.
I wouldn't try to throw my mom over the edge if you
Look,
wanted
okay.
to live.
Your mum will probably jump off when she has to stay in a balloon with you.
That's a fair point.
I'm so sorry. Why are we contemplating throwing Nexus's mum off the ship? She's
I
like
don't know. I
super-
like her better than Nexus. I say we throw Nexus off and
But
keep her
Hey!
with us.
I had the
That-
idea.
that's actually a really good idea, Nexus. Perhaps that's a good way of
Really?
doing
I
it.
thought you'd
So we,
laughing.
No, it's not bad.
no, it doesn't involve us getting caught and put on trial and executed. So I think
When
it's
the
a good
DM
plan.
railroads.
I'm not railroading. I'm giving you guys an option because I'm
was a
seeing you guys
suggestion.
getting thrown in prison.
We still could have done a heist, but Nick's
I
like,
want to
no.
do a heist. Please.
Cinder, we can do a heist, but maybe not for this, because we don't need to.
What's a
Well,
heist
first we have
without...
to see the mothers fight anyway.
What
Yeah,
is the
we need to find
fun
out
of a
who's
heist?
fighting.
Who is she fighting? Yeah.
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? She's your mother.
Yeah, but like I was here, but it was like 4 weeks ago. I don't remember the name of the guy.
Surely you should remember the person who beat up your mother.
I don't know what he looks
His
like.
father?
What does he look like?
He's kind of like orangey red, and he's got like a few horns and like some bandages on his arms.
Which kind of equals a lots of dragonborns.
Yeah, possibly.
Anyone else have any information?
Yeah, but
Listen.
we ask around the arena, someone will know, right?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we tell Nexus' father that we want to use the balloon to float above the battle and drop poison on his mother, but we won't really drop the poison, and we'll just leave. Because I don't want to tick off Mommy Dearest, but Daddy Longlegs, I don't mind leaving behind.
Cinder, we're not. There's a few little baby hiccups with that plan. We're not supposed to know that information. I doubt Nexus's father would disbelieve that we're all of a sudden on his side.
Also, we don't want to be on the dad's side, and we don't want to kiss up to him anyway.
And we don't want to draw attention to what we're going to do, so...
Anyway.
I know you really
Back
want
to
the
the
heist,
heist.
but it's not the time. No! She's
Come
like...
on.
Oh, great Sphinx.
What's a good
Well,
heist
let's
without the
bring
sense
people.
of risk? You know, every
Oh, yeah.
heist has risk. This is just like any other heist. Okay, let's do it. Get in
It's
touch with your
unnecessary risk,
inner
though.
thief.
I am not I don't have an inner thief.
And give him a pop round the head.
What was that?
What?
You get clocked around the head
Me?
We didn't
Yeah,
hear what that
by
was
Lorcan.
about.
Who caught up with you.
Lorcan?
Oh yeah, Lorcan.
Oh, I'm not a cleric. I was about to use my shock ability on him.
Reaction.
Hit me, will you? Well, listen.
You are a fascinating group of characters, said the Sphinx. I shall get you out of my library since you seem to have gathered the information you needed. And their eyes flare, and the book flies off Nexus' hand back into the shelf. And it looks at you, and it goes, please, you may not understand what this may mean now, but when you meet the creators, give them my grief and respect.
Yeah, of course. Nice
And
meeting you.
You all get teleported out back to the beginning of the restricted section.
Okay, new plan.
I thought he was doing it out of the library, not the restricted section. How dare.
Their library is the restricted section.
New plan.
Cinder!
I hope
Change.
somebody took note of that, though.
Of what?
What they just asked.
Give
When
her
we
a
see the
regard.
creators,
When you see the creators, give their regards.
give the regards.
Cinder, where's Nexus's dad?
No, I have the perfect plan. You gotta trust me. Okay?
Walk.
I disguise self.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your voice is going out.
The
Yeah.
council member
She-
got teleported out by the Sphinx.
The librarian's voice is so high pitched
Fine,
we
he
couldn't.
got teleported to the council room.
What?
Don't ask me how, I have no idea either.
Now what's he doing here? He wasn't in.
He appeared. Did you not see him come past you? He found us down there. Must be
Oh.
being a bit lax, I'm afraid, man.
Give me a deception.
He said we could go down there.
Oh, I have an advantage with deception. Oh, I like that.
The boss man said we could go down there, so we
Next.
went down there. What's the big deal?
Is that
Would
she didn't
11
see
work,
coming?
or do I need another higher roll? Because I'm going to go for a higher roll, so I'm going to go put another reroll point down.
Jonathan getting through those rerolls.
So
How does 11 sound? No.
Oh, let's keep it with you. Sounds like she's convinced.
Oh, perfect.
To make your way out of the library. Sorry, guys.
As
To make your way out of the library. And we're going on a break. And you guys can discuss what you're gonna do. So for now, stick around. We're just going to be 5 to 10 minutes, quick break, and hope you're enjoying. And let's see what they get up to next. They passed the 3 trials of the Sphinx.
Damn. I'm surprised.
So,
Yay.
see you all in a minute. Can you really not hear me? Hi!
Hello.
Welcome, everyone! Thanks for the warning, Peter. We are D&D Play 20. If you missed the first half, we're a group of amazing nerds, I guess, that love to play tabletop RPGs and D&D, and who are here playing a homebrew campaign in a homebrew world. And we're gonna get down to business. So,
Oh no.
you know that the balloon is displayed in Hero's Rest.
Yes.
And you are not allowed in this inner wall, in the council wall. It's not even called the inner wall, it's called the council wall. So getting there will be very nearly impossible without written permission from the council.
Right.
Nix, whilst you were all talking and discussing things, was taking notes on how to potentially repair the balloon. And Nix, you learned a few things, like you learned that it is powered by continual flame, a powerful continual flame spell. So that is always up in the air. You can diminish it or enhance it, but it's always on.
Is there a way of controlling its direction?
There is like oh, I forgot the name. Rudder.
Huh.
Yeah. And you would also have to make sure that the cap on the continual flame works, so you can control altitude, etc.
How do you have a continual flame?
It's a spell.
Oh.
As well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the main things you learn. Not a complicated invention.
Less so than a skiff.
So hear me out.
Considerably easier.
Hear me out,
So you guys
Nix.
are out of, yeah, you guys are out. Sorry, just 1 second, Cinder. You guys are now out of the library.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
DM, do we get a long rest anytime soon?
We just got up.
You just got up. This is like 10 a.m.
Apparently, I've used a lot of spell slots.
For silly stuff.
I don't know. They're checked off.
You disguised yourself. but
That's
then I
not a
don't-
spell slot.
You went invisible. But I don't know what else you did.
Last
Did you
session.
mark off a long rest before?
Last session, you were the entire session on.
In a
Yeah, that's true. I was. So I never
No.
marked off my long rest.
No.
Yeah,
You never
it
marked off your
doesn't
long rest.
like it. Because you started the session before your long
full
rest,
power.
and you slept at the
Yeah.
end, and you had your long rest.
Yeah.
You just check that off.
Just be careful that you have 13 points of damage, though.
From burning
the
yourself.
fire. You're not escaping that.
I had my hit point max reduced, didn't I? To 31.
Oh, what was that from?
Yes, you did, but that was until your long rest. So that
Okay.
You've not had it since.
Well, that makes me feel much better, literally.
Yeah.
I only had 18 points left.
And now?
Now I got 37.
Feeling a bit better, isn't it?
Yes. And I'm going to roll for my Staff of Healing charges too. 6. Fully charged.
Damn, yeah.
Awesome. I feel so much better. I should check off my disguise and my hidden step, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Everything's fixed. So as we're outside the library, I'm going to be leaning down as we walk, trying to talk Nix into the heist. And I say, hear me out, Nix. I could disguise myself, go up to the balloon, and then grab hold of it and thunderstep 120 feet away.
Yeah.
And then we just hop in and fly away.
Cheers. A simple plan, to be sure, but consider that, one, I don't think you can do that with an object of that size. Am I wrong? How does your teleportation work?
Well, my clothes come with me.
Okay. So she takes that off as like a negative. Like she... Also...
Wait, it's a negative
From what
that
I-
my clothes come with me? You want to see me naked? Who
From
are
what
you? Illican?
Yes. She is Illican in disguise. From what I know, I don't think it's ready to fly straight away. So even if you could just steal it, we wouldn't be able to fly away in it, and we'll be arrested and et cetera, et
Well,
cetera.
why don't we do this? Why don't we form our own restoration organization and we apply to restore it?
Okay, so here comes what Lorcan and Nexus know. It's like what all the schools when you're a kid visit this monument basically. It is tied down, but it's it's floating off the air, but it's tied down.
Right.
But it's technically like, at least in it is partially in the air.
So it's already
Floating.
filled up.
It's filled up. Now, how maneuverable it is, if the rest of it is.
It's a different story.
Well, could we fix it
If you
in
can
the
even
air?
stand inside it is a different matter.
Can we fix it while we're in the air?
If there's a bottom, for instance, yeah. But what if part of the thing that is that needs fixing is the where you stand inside? You haven't seen it.
You know, DM, you're not helping this dream heist happen, okay?
You want to go to prison? Do it.
I'd just escape anyways.
So Nyx is still humoring Cinder. And she goes, Cinder, I'm sorry to say this is not the time for the heist. There's too many things we do not know and we're not ready for. So let's just go with the idea of using it as a celebration balloon for when Nexus's mum wins the fight. Also, it serves as a good excuse to stay and see what happens with her.
I thought we wanted to leave.
We will, but this gives us a good reason to solve two things in one go.
Fine, we'll do it your way, but... Wait! Fang! Maybe Fang can help us get it.
Well,
That's when you remember that Fang. You left Fang asleep in the inn at the edge of the bed in the morning.
Didn't put him to sleep.
He's a fae. He don't sleep.
He's a celestial, not a fae.
Alright, fine. I'm gonna go to the inn and take a nap then, since I can't do anything I want to do right now. Nix.
Insight check. Insight check. Is he actually going to the inn, or is he going to do
Roll
the heist by
insight
himself?
check.
Okay.
I have nothing to do
I like
with
that.
this, guys.
I know, it's nothing to do with you. I was almost
Someone
imagining.
disconnected again.
Yeah, Larkin is having to restart his computer.
Yeah, sorry.
That is a nat 19 for 23.
Wait, he's
And
back
she'll guide
now?
herself.
Yep.
That was fast.
Yeah.
25.
I had to reboot the PC, sorry.
35 to see if I'm being honest. Yeah, I was
If
being
he
honest.
actually is going... Yeah, he's going back. Okay, good.
My thinking was just lay around all day.
Yeah, you guys. Well, you still don't know who Akra's gonna be fighting. And if you wanted to do this, you need permission, and you need Akra to agree to it. And still quite a few things you guys need to do if you want to go ahead with this plan too.
Where does the battle take place?
Tomorrow afternoon.
What would we use? Are we going to paint the balloon to support her, or would we be allowed to do that?
I don't know. I think step one would be to discuss with her, since she's the centerpiece of the plan.
Is it a display if she wins?
That was my idea, but
No, I think it's great. Show her off to the people. And then flee.
It's
Uh-huh.
alright.
it's the first time that the court got involved with, like, an arena battle. If she is deserving of the win, then it'll be a big deal, won't it?
Definitely. Why don't we propose it to the court?
Little problem, y'all. Just saying. I don't like to lie.
Nick squints at him.
Okay, sometimes, but I actually like his mother. Don't care much for Daddy or for Nexus, but I like his mother.
So you want to show her off to the world?
I just don't want to betray her, make her think that we're gonna honor her, and then not honor her.
Well, who says that we don't have to? Who says that we aren't going to honor her? We can give her a ride in it and show her off to the people, and then we can drop her off once the parade is done and then leave.
Oh, and say we're taking it back, but not really
Yeah.
take it back.
And not just take it back.
Okay. So, that's kind of like a heist, right?
Yeah.
I'm in. I knew I'd get my way.
Aye. So we can heist it after the parade.
That works. See, Nix, my plan works.
There's no way around this heist. Just like, really like... Alright, if we're going to do this, Lorcan, there's going to be repercussions for you and Nexus. If we take this, then you're not going to be able to come back without
Well,
going
no,
to jail,
we're not
perhaps.
heisting it. Cinder's heisting it. It'll be on Cinder.
I
He's
can
like,
live
"Oh,
with that."
I'm fully planning coming back here and say he kidnapped us both.
Yeah.
And we fear for our lives.
I mean, who wouldn't look at him?
He's crazy. Yeah.
Well, if we find my cure where we're going, I'll look totally different anyways.
Yes.
That
and
is a
then
fair point.
He will be a different person.
And if we bring it back, we've managed to, save it and bring it back.
So many things that could go wrong in Nix's mind with these plans. It's like...
Nexus can bring
I
it
think-
back.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Maybe we should talk to Akra first.
Well, I think it's more the council, because we can suggest them doing a parade for the winner, even if it's not Accra.
Problems with that, if the other, unlikely as it is, she looks at Nexus, that this other individual wins, then we have another problem. Well, if they can beat Nexus's mother, what's it to stop them from beating us, the Pulp?
Well, because they won't beat us for a balloon that we're taking back for the council.
Can his father fly?
Nix's father doesn't have wings. No.
As an engineer, Nix.
Then we honor him by throwing him out of the balloon.
Surely you are the right person to be pilot.
I don't like my dad, but I don't want to be part of his murder.
He shakes her head at Cinder.
How about we ask Nexus's dad? He might like the idea of showing off the winner.
And she'll go back to Lorca and she goes, I don't doubt that I possibly could pilot it. It'll be quite... She smiles a little bit, again, despite herself. It is an interesting invention to be sure, and I would love to give it a go, but less risk if we can.
Are you scared?
I'm not scared. I'm terrified. She's very honest with him.
But it's not risky because A, we're just doing a parade for the winner, and then flying off at the end after we've dropped them all off.
All right. So how would we get an audience with the council?
As we just said, Nexus's father.
What? How? She goes.
Because he wants to show off whoever wins.
He wants to show off one winner.
My dad wants to show off if my mother wins, but he seems pretty confident she won't. Which we need to take care of, by the way.
Yes, but we need to then go ask your father who it is that's fighting and if they would be willing to go for a
He wouldn't
parade.
tell me.
Well, if he wants a parade, he kind of has to.
You know he wouldn't tell me. He thinks I'm gonna just try to stop him.
True. You don't need to go. We need to go.
Oh yeah, you're not supposed to know. Sure. I'll stay here.
Exactly.
Cool.
But you need to get us an audience.
My mom can.
Yes, and we'll suggest the if we suggest the idea to the mother, she might say yeah, fair. It'd be good to see for the people to see the rightful winner. Might bring a bit of spirit back.
Right.
Okay. Well, then we need to talk to your mother, Nexus. And then we need to know who she's fighting. We don't have enough information for my liking.
Yeah. Shall we go ask her? Surely
Let's do
she
it.
should know, right? She
Yeah.
knows at least the name of the person.
Yeah.
That'll be a lead.
Shall we go back then?
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take to get there then?
To get from where to where?
To Nexus's house from where we are.
About half an hour.
Okay.
Okay. You making your way back to Nexus's house then?
Yeah.
All right. You do. When you get there, as you're approaching Nexus's house, there's like grunts coming from it.
Grunts
Yeah.
in Nexus's. How bad do these grunts sound?
Sound like exercise.
Exercising. Okay. Nexus, you're up.
Holy, my mom's training. Hell no.
No, it doesn't sound like training. You're up.
Who did you say?
Nexus.
No, if my mom's training, I'm not going in there.
Fine, I'll ring the doorbell.
Nexus, if that's you, I will kill you for interrupting my training.
I forgot my name.
Akron.
Akra, it's me.
Oh, Lord, can you 1 second?
Nix looks at Nexus
It's a
to see his
switch,
reaction to
Christ.
that.
I never understood. I don't get it.
I'm sure she loves you very much, but she doesn't sound convinced. So she pats him on the elbow.
It's a love-hate relationship. He's too similar to her.
So, quickly she comes and opens the door. She's like, you can see she's still got like a massive weight in her hand. And she goes, "What can I do for it?"
We were just curious of who it was that your opponent was for this fight.
Oh, that piece of trash.
Yes. Does he have a
Mhm.
name?
Oh, he has one, he does. His name is Amtos Nakul.
His name is what?
Amtos Nakul.
Amtos Nakul.
I will spell it.
Please. Is he a dragonborn?
Yeah, worst kind.
Why? What is he? Is he
He's
green?
a
I
weird
understand that.
mix.
Weird. Oh, is he?
His red makes a taupe.
I don't know what that means.
He thinks it's fancy because he's got some crystal heritage.
Oh.
Here. She shows you a poster with the two of them for the fight.
Oh.
And I'll show you what it looks like.
That's him. Nice. He looks a bit skinny.
He cheated! Used magic! Like proper spells and whatnot. I said this.
Is he not allowed to use spells?
No, it's a gladiator's ring.
But people use spells in gladiators' rings.
No, they use magical abilities.
Is a spells not magical abilities?
Spell's a spell. Because one thing is you fighting with you being bigger or with fire. Another is you making the other person paralyzed. Just by looking at
Cinder? No.
them. What are you saying? I'm confused.
Well, he said just paralyzed just by looking at them.
Oh,
Just-
Yeah.
Oh
Next
yeah.
up, petrified.
We were both out of it. It's alright. Just went right over my
Well, he's
head.
got the basilisk guy, hasn't he? So, we were just curious of where he is. We kind of wanted to scout the competition out for him.
I know him. Well,
Oh.
he's a piece of trash that shouldn't be ranked. That's what he is. Bleh.
Where is he?
I don't know.
Oh. Oh, also, we were thought Nix was thinking of an idea for the ceremony afterwards for the winner.
Big slap.
Me?
Yeah.
Nice. What are you planning?
Well, over your,
Which
we
tavern are you
decided.
in?
That's for after. That's the evening.
That is for after. She goes, "Oh look." She goes, "We thought what would be a better way than celebrate your rightful victory than to parade you over the skies of Carolyn in the balloon."
I can fuck. In the balloon.
In the balloon.
The balloon?
The balloon.
The balloon.
That would tell the mother to shut it. I like it. I
Well,
self
obviously-
It's okay.
Yeah.
We are not going to throw
But-
you out of it. Don't worry.
She goes,
It's a weird one.
never mind him, he's weird. Yeah, she like laughed it off. She goes, but We obviously need permission from the council, but if we have your go-ahead, maybe you have a bit of
Pull.
leeway.
Sure. I'll put in a good word for you. If I win the fight, the council loses this time.
Wait, don't we have to repair it in order to do it?
But we need the permission of the council.
Wait, are you saying you can even fix it?
Yeah.
I can. Just one.
She can.
You see, Akra puts the weight down. And with one hand,
Manhandles next. Got it.
Nick's up.
I saw that coming.
And she looks you. So just put her inside and it'll be fixed.
She's like, how does she go? Like, is she holding her like this? Or is she holding it?
Like her massive hand almost goes around all of your back, so it's kind of like just holding you under the arm.
Like a teddy.
She's like, "Eep." She gets picked up. She goes, she's not. She said, not exactly put me inside, but I can take a look and fix it up with the right materials.
Alright, you're coming with me then.
I
And
guess
she,
so.
like, hooks you in.
Yeah.
Starts making her way.
She goes, I guess we're going, ah! She goes,
We'll follow along.
Alright. Will you follow?
Where?
You just took Nick's.
Straight to the balloon?
Yep.
Hell yes.
Alright. So.
How are we gonna get through?
Ah!
It's called Nexus's mom's got a gun on. It's fun.
So as you walk through the first wall's guards, again, no problem, nobody stops anybody. Through the second wall, you see the guards kind of give Akra a bow, but kind of like glare at all of you. As you get to the bridges to the inner wall, the guards stop her and she goes, I don't think so. And they all kind of look at each other and they're like uncertain whether to let her pass. And she goes, do you want me to do an early display of what's going to happen in the arena to you two knuckleheads? And you see that they shake their head and they very slowly open the not the gate, the
Ranks.
weapons they had crossed, and they look at each other and they go, but please let us just report that you're coming. She goes, sure. And she's like, goes to cross her arms, puts Nick's down.
Still got
crosses
Nick's.
her arms.
Yeah. She goes, oh, like, oh, thank you. She's like feeling a bit woozy.
Oh yeah, she kind of walked like
Yeah,
this.
like it's a name. Like, she's like.
So about 2 minutes later, you see this like very fancy, you assume like admiral or something, come and look at Akra and go, what do you want? She goes, I have business for the arena tomorrow. And he goes, that's not with the council. Yeah, them is. I have an idea for what you owe me when I win. It is Akra, I know you're confident, but there's no reason to believe you will win the second time. We found no evidence of foul play. That's bullshit. And you know it. What do you want? If I win, and these, and she picks up by like the scruff, she picks up Nick's, she can fix your little balloon and parade the winner, if it isn't me, around the city. You see, he cocks his head. You want to allow a foreigner in this inner wall, really,
Well,
and someone contagious by the looks of it.
actually, unfortunately, he's not contagious.
Lorcan's not contagious.
I'll ask the chancellor. That is
Very good for morale.
working on.
On a side note, if I am contagious, it's already too late for you.
You see, he like, takes a step back. And,
It's fine. No, really, I've been treating him. I'm very good at what I do. I'm an alchemist. He is not contagious.
he's
She
already
tries
walking.
to assure.
Running.
I really hate when people. She goes, I really hate when people. Yeah, she trails off and she goes, nice to meet you. I really hate when people just walk away halfway through my explanation. So kind of trails off.
You're still like hanging by the back
Yeah,
of the
she's
clothes.
just like, can you put me down, please? She just looks through the check.
She puts you down.
Thank you.
You wait a couple minutes and you see Chancellor, like he said, he was going to fall apart.
The Chancellor. The Senate.
I see you've come
Oh.
to discuss a parade for the victor. You seem very confident, my dear. I appreciate it. What are they doing here? You see he scans around for Nexus, which stay behind. They can fix your precious balloon. And she picks, like, does the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, things like goes like that.
She can
She goes-
fix it. And he looks at you. So you just put her in and he'll fix it.
No, why does everyone think that you just put in the little
Yeah.
gnome?
Add a halfling into machine.
Halfling,
Ta-da!
Magical,
She goes-
yes. Halfling in a machine makes it work.
Do we have a
Something, no.
deal? He goes, for the winner? For the winner. It'll be me, but yeah, for the winner. You see, there's like a pause. I would like one of you to roll me a d20.
Hell, who?
One.
What are we rolling?
A
Who's the
d20.
brave
Just
one?
not for anything. Just a d20.
Cinder's already rolled 70.
Go on then. 11. 11.
11 plus. What is your persuasion?
Cinder already
You
rolled.
see, that's why I want
No,
to
no,
ask.
no. What is your persuasion modifier?
Mine is nothing.
Is it 0?
Persuasion, yeah.
Add a +2. +3, sorry.
So 14.
14. You see, so you can see it.
So my roll don't count?
What was your roll?
17.
I was saying it.
Okay. My bad.
I said 7.
We'll take his. Alright, sure.
Yeah.
I generally didn't see it. Alright, sure.
Plus 3, so it's 20.
+3 is fine. You see, he goes, sure. I want to see how the gnome works.
The gnome.
And he goes to take Nick's Akra. She goes, my gnome.
She goes, she goes, well, I love being, being in this position of being able to fix ship. I am my own gnome. Thank you.
Nexus
But I will
clears
help.
his throat.
You see that they look at each other and they go, nah. Just continue walking with you.
She tried.
Nexus. Go take
Nexus
your
is
gnome.
not there.
Oh, is he not?
No, because he knew you guys were gonna go see
Oh,
that.
right. Yeah,
So you go and again, Nix, you look and it is a beautiful sight. It is a massive hot air balloon with the I don't know what it's called. What's it called? The
Blimp?
bit.
yeah. Balloon.
Balloon.
The
The
balloon, the fabric is in the colors of Caroline, which is light blue and red. the colors, and it is floating about 15 feet off the ground, tied with ropes.
Still working.
It is working. You don't know to what extent.
But
So you see, Akra looks at it, looks at Nyx. Nyx, I want you. No, I want you to roll me a dexterity save.
Yeah, so Nyx is like, Nyx was completely distracted. She's like, that is a beautiful. Flung.
I need you to do a dexterity save, please.
Nat 20. Not kidding.
wow.
Wow.
I didn't know
so
gnomes
then
could
you
fly.
know, he
Gnomes can
tried
fly.
to throw you into where the flame bit is.
What?
But Nick, you see it coming, and you like roll like on yourself, and you grab onto the metal instead. And as you grab it onto the metal, you look down to drop yourself into the basket area of it,
And
and
there's
you
no floor.
notice that it's kind of like mostly rotten. If you land
Oh.
from this height, you might just fall
Ew.
through.
Oh,
Felt like.
You also from here see that the rudder is broken and that there is no cap to lower the continual flame of this whole flame.
Oof. Okay. She's like, ooh. She's like still in shock, like she's like she's surprised as much as anyone else that she's not dead.
You see that Nexus is that goes, it's not working. It's not fixed. She's like, I don't know, he said he fixed it.
She goes, I'm okay, by the way. She calls down. She goes, I can fix it. Just give me a bit of time.
Can I help?
So she goes, I'm okay, but the free hand she'll reach into her bag of holding
What do you need?
and she'll rock.
Yes.
Right now to get down from the...
Yeah, she's like, 1 second. She called down from above. 1 second. She pulls out from her bag of holding
You need
her
a
little
second check.
elixir. Huh? What?
I want to see if you can hold yourself with just one arm. From...
Why?
You're hanging.
You're hanging.
It's fine. Even if I drop, it should be fine as long as I can grab what I need. It's fine. 18.
Yeah, you're fine for now.
Yeah, so she's very dexterous. So she very careful. Like she's like dips her hand in and calls to her hand an elixir that has like kind of like a clear liquid within it, cloudy white, and she's gonna unstop her and it's her elixir of flight. She's gonna like drink it,
Oh.
and
okay.
she lets go and she just floats. And it just so she goes,
Oh, that's why she can fix it. She's part like a balloon. Does he know wings and she's flying?
so
Inspiration to
with that-
DM.
So with that, Nyx will start looking without having to touch the rotten bottom. She's gonna start fixing the balloon. She'll go
Question:
to the cap.
Mm-hmm.
Can Cinder reach the bottom of the basket or whatever?
It's
50
50
feet
feet
up.
up. How tall are you?
I don't know, 7 something.
Yeah, I think you need to jump up, but you probably...
I'll get thrown.
Lorcan, hold me up.
What?
Let me stand on your shoulders. Trust me. You're a strong guy, right?
Oh, I gotta regret this. So I take out my shield and make like a platform for him to stand on, and then push him up on the shield so that nothing drips onto me.
Now can I reach it? Because I got to maintain for a minute.
Sure. You're gonna say yes, you'll help it, yeah.
I'm going to
Good
cast
plan.
mending on the bottom of the basket.
Alright. Mending doesn't replace rotten material. You would just close gaps. So, as you start mending it, the gaps close, but you see that the material is still rotten. Cinder, you're smart enough to know, in my opinion, it's up to you, But I think you'd be smart enough to know that you can do it, and you'll need to do it exactly what you're doing, but you'll need to get new planks. On your
Okay.
new wicker. for the
You
ball.
can, you can let me down now, Lorcan.
Alright, jump down
Yep. You're on your own, Nix. Sorry.
She goes, it's fine. No, she was busy. She's busy looking at the continual flame cap.
then. Alright, of course she is the techie bit.
What are you looking at, sorry?
The continual flame cap to see if it needs to be. Well, it does, right?
From what you remember seeing of the
Schematics.
schematics, you will need a metal cap connected to a rope with a weight that you can close and open with gears so that you can like open it at different angles.
Oh.
Is there anything around that could
That
be...
doesn't exist at all. You need to make a new one. Sorry, Peter. What?
Is there anything around that can be used as a basket?
As wicker, not around. No. You'd have to ask. You see, Akra and Nexus's father are like watching Nick what Nick is doing.
Pardon
What
me,
do you
work.
need?
Go ahead.
Sorry, what's in there?
Can I ask where we can get wicker?
Yeah. You see, he goes, "Oh, I'll order something this weekend." And you see, he starts walking away, to go get some. And within like 10 minutes, they bring wicker and planks of wood and
Oh, great.
for you.
Nix needs a few things then to cobble something together for the cap, right? So she'll let them know. So she goes, I'm gonna need a few extra parts to fix it.
So, as you say that, the people that are bringing the wicker and the planks, Akra goes, "You stay, listen." And she points, and you're like,
Nix floats to the edge
Jump
of the
a little bit.
the balloon. Like looks down, she goes, and obviously she would know what she needs, right, to construct this, like a basic.
yeah, you could tell what you need. Yeah.
Yeah, she just outlines. Oh, I need a bit of this, need a bit of that. Do we have that available? She like makes note of it.
They look at each other like, you're asking the most ridiculous question.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Can I have it, please?
You see,
Thank
they
you.
start making their way out. And again, within 5-10 minutes, they come back with everything you asked for.
Thank you.
That's good.
So it will take you about, to fix it completely, it will take you most of the day. Akra gets bored after about 20 minutes and walks off.
Can you do?
But
Okay, so
when she does, like within 2 minutes, the admiral that you guys saw comes back and is just silently watching what you're doing. Like supervising
So-
you. Kind of stuff.
yeah, so the first thing Nix would have done, because her potion is limited, she would have tried to fix the floor, so
That's
she doesn't
what
fall through
Cinder's
it.
doing.
Oh, the Cinder's working on that. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So
I need a
Nix
ladder.
Larkin is your ladder right now.
Okay. I'll start fixing the wicker basket.
Yeah. And I'll help him.
Can she help him with
I
that?
don't need to do any strength checks.
You are. Is that what you want to fix first?
Basket.
No, I'm asking Nick.
So,
Yeah, she needs to, because otherwise she's gonna fall. She needs to
Alright,
help
I'm
her fix
going
it.
to say that it's for you to fix the wicker basket, it takes you about 2 hours.
does Nick's fall in 2 hours?
Probably.
She'll-
Long is only for an hour.
Yeah, it's only 10 minutes, so she would have made sure that she was it's hard. It's like secure. Like she would have grabbed onto the edge of what she can, so she doesn't like fall into the
I'm
wall.
saying that with that time, you could probably just tie a rope around yourself from the top.
Yeah, well, like secure herself so she doesn't fall. Yeah.
Yeah, you work most of the day on fixing this, so I will need Cinder. I want you to roll me a. Give me a sleight of hand. No, give me a. What is your spellcasting modifier? Sorry, what is your spell ability? If you were doing an attack with a spell, what would be your bonus?
The DC would be 14. My bonus is +6.
+6. Okay.
Modifier is +3.
Okay, so it's a +6. I would like you to roll me a sleight of hand roll, but it will be with that +6 added to it.
20.
Beautiful. Alright, so you're doing a great job on your part. Lorcan, I need you to give me a strength, either athletics or, yeah, it will be a athletics or strength check.
They're the same, so it doesn't really matter.
You could be proficient in athletics, I wasn't sure.
No, I'm proficient in. Weirdly enough.
Hold me steady!
22.
22, give me a constitution saving throw.
Why?
Just questioning the DM.
18.
Right, it was to see if you could hold Cinder up for that long. You're fine.
Oh, I thought it was because he was going to throw up on me or something.
Great. Having nightmares already.
I'm going to start calling you beefcakes again.
Well.
So yeah, so you both are fine. Nick, give me a Tinker's Tools check.
Roll.
Tinker's tools.
I'm just considering whether I should give you advantage because you took notes on the thing beforehand.
I will not
You've
say no to
never
that.
done it before, so I think it's gonna be a straight roll.
I mean, I would argue that you owe Nyx because you threw her at this thing of this, like a
That's accurate.
baseball.
That's not me. So
It's not you. Gotcha.
hey, look, Akra is not a gentle person. All right.
Honestly, Nyx thought Akra was just gonna fly her up there and not pelt her like a baseball. But
Yeah, it would have been nicer, wouldn't
yeah, a little bit.
it? But Aqua is very heavy-handed, I think is the word.
Yes. Correct. So where's that check?
Check.
Yeah.
22.
22. You guys are like, it's taking time, but you guys are doing beautiful work. By nightfall, the rudder's in place. The wicker basket has been fixed. And it's not perfect, but the cap with different opening angles for the continual flame is functional.
Good.
It took you all day and you are absolutely shattered.
A little a goggle,
well.
like just like just constant work, doesn't say anything. The only time she speaks is to like ask for like this and that, like that she might be missing. But apart from that, she's very disciplined and she's exhausted by the end of it.
Done really well then.
Okay. Can she test it?
Yeah.
Like after
As you close part of it, it immediately starts lowering down slowly. 5 feet.
just stands.
Does it just go at 5 feet or does it go?
Well, she only lowers it a little bit because it's still full, isn't it? So
She's like,
This heist is a lot of work.
it occurs
I think I got
to you,
it.
however, that this wasn't the perfect invention of Devon either. You start as you look at it, you're like, if it's full, even if I close completely the continual flame, it's not gonna go down because the hot air has nowhere to go. You'll need a hole at the top.
With a lever. Oh, great!
That was not part of the schematic. But as you test
But
it, pretty obvious.
it's evident. Okay. It's better, but it could use it a bit more touch-ups, I think. She gives it a scrutinizing look.
I mean, it's late, but if you're allowed to come through tomorrow and the admiral is still watching you guys work, it could take you the rest of the morning to finish it up, and the fight is in the afternoon.
What do you think?
Alright, I think yeah, we come back tomorrow and finish it before the fight.
Okay, sounds good. How are you gonna get to the top?
She goes, that's a very good question. I'll think on it.
Do you want me to get Aqua to throw you up there?
Maybe fly me up there next time.
Why don't you just fly up there yourself?
Well, I'm gonna try and get myself up there again, but you know.
I mean,
I'm still working on my elixirs, so it's trial and error.
You could sit on top of the balloon. You're small enough. And do your work on it.
Just don't fall through a hole. How are you gonna cut a hole in the top if it's still got all the air in?
Fireball!
Please, no fire.
Will we have to let it down?
That's the thing, you won't be able to let it down if the air has...
No. We have to let it down so that we can then put the hole in the top to fill it up again.
For that, you need the continual flame to be off for like the whole night.
Yeah.
How long would it take to refill?
Based on the size of the flame, Nick, you predict about 2 hours.
What do you think, Nick?
That means an early morning.
She examines it. She goes, we would need to be up quite early. It will take about 2 hours. However, she goes down. She looks towards Cinder. Cinder, do you have a way of dispelling magic? You do, right?
Yes.
She goes, good, we're gonna need it.
Huh? Why?
Well, the continual flame spell is what's holding it up and creating the hot air.
Oh!
You could close the thing completely, and if you leave it overnight, it will...
Less now.
It will,
Would it be
empty
enough?
the air slowly.
Okay, so she doesn't need to dispel it, gotcha. So she...
Yeah, that's what you did. You created a cap over the continual flame to control how...
Oh, I thought it wasn't enough to get it to the ground. Or lower.
It is not because...
The hot air has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you leave it long enough...
It'll slowly go down.
Gotcha. It's alright. We'll keep that as a backup plan.
Heating it up, the air will slowly cool down.
She goes, but it should be fine with the cap installed. Alright. Shall we get some rest?
Aye. But we have to be back early in case they see it deflated and blame us.
You see, the Admiral is watching and hearing.
Should we make a sign saying don't tamper with balloon?
I won't let anyone tamper with this, but I hope you are right if you are not breaking our historical gift.
We're improving it.
She goes,
It's looks much better. So far I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I believe then I'll be expecting you tomorrow morning. Now make haste, I want to go home today still.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Emma, for your time,
We're all
and
very off then.
we will make it the pride of Caroline. She gestures to the balloon, and she takes her leave. She's not sure if she needs to salute him or anything, so she opts to just like wave and walk away.
Alright. You guys make your way back to Larkin or Nexus?
Lawkins.
But you know that Larkin's front door leads to the courtyard from Nexus back door. And as you approach, are you talking? Are you chatting? You just worked for hours on
Yeah,
it,
we're
so you
chatting.
probably
We're
chatted.
going to bed.
You like quiet then, walking back. Are you quietly walking back?
Yeah.
Nick's deep in thought about what she needs to do in the morning.
Cinder?
Cinder's too tired to talk.
Alright. As you get to Larkins, you see an entrance site.
Uh-oh.
Before you get in, you look over to Nexus' house, and you see Nexus kind of fell asleep on a bench outside the house. And you see Akra came over, hands on hips, slaps his shoulder, just falls to the ground. He doesn't wake up. And you see a smile on her face. And you see her pick him up over the shoulder and bring him in. Completely unaware that you guys were in the courtyard.
Looks like somebody's been drinking.
And
Nick
She's
smiles to
always
herself.
like that.
So we should plan our trip, right? Before we go to bed?
Yes, how far do you think this could do in a day?
you have no idea yet.
Yeah, it's all new to her. It's a new science.
I mean, it definitely should be faster than walking.
Yeah, she goes, I don't have an exact number, but it should be way quicker than just legging it.
Right. Depends on the wind.
It's
then, I
new.
guess.
It's new, and I'm looking forward to taking notes on it.
We
Hard,
should
but happy.
we should fill the bag of holding with food and rations and drink.
Oh, you know what I think we should do? Just in case something breaks and we do stay in the air, should we put something really heavy in the bag of holding?
You mean in the bag?
Hmm.
Yeah. Just so that we
You
can.
know that
Like
the
a
bag
weight.
of holding has a limit of weight.
Oh, does it?
You can only take the maximum of 5
£100 is fine, isn't it?
100 pounds is like
Oh.
20 kilos.
Oh. It's not that heavy.
Food and water is important, considering where we're going.
100 pounds is 45 kilos.
I don't know how much we've got in the bag of holding anyway.
How much do you already have in the bag of holding?
Hold on, if it can only have
500.
500, which is 200 and something kilos.
You guys can all fit
Can we offer? Oh.
just about.
With all the stuff that's already in there?
Yeah.
Should we
That's
put
a lot.
something heavy in there so that even if we go up, we can pull something out of the bag of holding and lower us down with extra weight?
Like a counterweight.
Yeah, just in case something does happen unexpectedly.
Why shouldn't we just bring parts to fix it?
Well, because it will be on top of the balloon. Do you want to climb up on top of a balloon at 1,000 feet? I'm not.
But
Let's put it
Nyx
that
can
way.
fly. I just saw her flying.
I want to know, do any of you have any navigator's tools or vehicles
No.
proficiency?
Nope.
Oh no. That's
This is
not
gonna
something
be
she
such a
trained
good,
for.
a fun session of roll.
We're gonna get
Oh,
lost.
no. It's gonna be good.
That'll be funny.
So yeah, well, good night, guys. Because well, I think we just need to follow it towards where the black hole was, don't we? To try and cross there. So we know where we're going. We are going north.
North it is.
Can I exchange my cook's utensils for navigation?
No.
More kind of the same, right? Navigating.
Because
through.
no one will eat my cooking.
Maybe we might need to find a navigator.
So you guys were trying to decide getting food as well. So how will you do that? Will one of you go get food whilst the rest of you work? Is that what
Maybe in the morning, yes.
In the morning, yeah, I assume so. Alright.
It's a Nexus to do it, it's fine.
So, yeah. You all sleep, get a long rest at Larkin's house. The next morning, Nexus is already there when you get up for breakfast, asking how it went. And you tell him to go get some food whilst you guys go finish it up. You know, you ask Nexus for money.
She gives him however much she thinks he needs.
He'll take it and he'll do his best to buy mostly meat. And beer.
Mostly meat and beer.
How's the tavern doing?
He will take Fang with him to get food. I'm sorry, what's the what?
Have we made any profit from the tavern?
Yeah, Fang gave you, I told you, it was,
That's right.
at the time I told you you were going to get about 100 gold pieces per week. It's been 3 weeks, so you have that. Fang would have brought that with you.
Alright, so we've got about 600.
100 each,
Oh,
or
100 gold.
300 gold. The reason you got a lot at the start was because it was New Year's, it was special occasion.
Oh, special occasion, I see. So therefore we only got
300.
standard 100 per week.
100 per week.
Decent, though.
Yep.
Pretty decent.
So yeah, you guys.
One
have
thing.
fun. Yeah.
One thing, in order to prepare the night before, Nyx would have tried to do some quick elixirs. So I get to roll for 2.
Is it your daily one?
It's the day. She gets to do 2 now, for a long rest.
Yeah, daily 2 then. Okay.
Yeah, I'll roll a d6 just so you know.
Roll your stuff.
Nice. That's exactly what I needed. Excellent. 5 is flight.
What did you get?
4 and a 5, and 5 is flight. So she's good.
5 is fine. That was what you needed, wasn't it?
Yeah. Alright,
God,
so
damn good roll.
Yeah.
so you all prepare. Fang goes with Nexus to get food. You all head back to the district and help Nyx with what she needs, and the admiral is there watching. He was waiting for you guys in the morning to give you passage to it.
Oh.
And he's very interested in watching how you've been fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of activity in the city as you made your way, even though it's early. There's people preparing. You see posters everywhere about the fight. People advertising for where to eat whilst watching the fight, and bets going on. And
Oh, I put mine on.
right. Let me know how much you bet.
How much do I have? Next, how much do I have?
Lorcan, we won't be here.
What?
Aren't we leaving on the balloon? How are you going to collect?
I can still collect winnings.
Ah.
Maybe before we leave.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to land the balloon and we've got to take the winner, so therefore I can collect my winnings after they've won the fight. Nice and easy.
Right. Right out. Waves at the admiral.
So I need you to tell me how much.
100 100 GP of gems.
This is Nexus Mother versus someone else?
Yep.
Yeah.
On Accra, right? You're betting on Accra.
Yes. And I will put an extra 50 on the other guy being called a cheat.
Okay, so the odds. So Accra's odds, I'm gonna write so I don't remember. So I do remember. Wow. Are at the moment are 16 to 1.
Because she lost last time.
Against the mother?
And the
I'm betting 100.
odds of cheating, of being called cheater,
Yeah.
are 2 to 1.
That
As
Sorry,
in
100 to 1. Sorry.
100 to 1. What,
Is
being
this-
called a cheater or being found out as a cheater?
Called a cheater.
Oh,
They're very low odds because
wow. Chris been calling him a cheater all the way.
exactly it's very low odds, so everybody's expecting that to happen.
But no, I'm saying found out as a cheater.
Oh,
Not just
okay.
being called a cheater.
So that's
Exposed as a cheater.
Yeah.
okay. So those odds are about 20.
A lot.
Wait,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And yeah, Cinder also does
100 on Mama winning.
I was like 100 to 1 means less.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it's more, it's so likely to happen that you get very little.
Jeez.
Is it 2 then?
Yeah.
I was right. You looked at me like I was crazy, so I thought I was getting it wrong.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Right.
So, but being found a cheater is unlikely. They don't think he's gonna be
No,
found.
I don't think it'll be found a cheater. That's probably like 100 to 1 price.
No, it's 20 to 1. So a lot of people believe it,
Oh.
but not a lot of people think he's going to actually be found.
Ah, I see. So there's lots of people that believe that he's a cheater, right? So a lot of people will believe us if we say that he is cheating. That's something to know, isn't it, guys?
So
Nix,
yeah.
I'm broke. Can I have more money?
What?
It's just all you gamble away. But no.
I just bet all my
I got
money.
information next. This is how you get information. You talk to the people.
So yeah, you guys went back and spent the entire morning setting it up and refilling the air, the hot air, and it seems fully functional, except for I need Nick to
check.
give me another Tinker's. Actually, no, I need you to give me.
Uh-oh.
It wouldn't be Tinker for this one. I'm gonna say sleight of hand.
Ah!
Sleight of hand.
Because
Why?
you're not proficient in Weaver's tools.
Okay.
You can do this, Nix. I know you can.
You
Good luck.
can guide yourself and stuff.
Help
And
action.
if anybody is helping you, is different.
Yeah, she's gonna be like, it's not my expertise, I might need a bit of a hand with this part.
You put the needle through the cloth and you pull through the thread. That's
If
my
somebody's
help.
helping you, you have advantage.
Alright, one second.
I think you had a helper there.
Yeah. One second, I just need to check something. Thank you for the help. I'll do the roll, but I was looking for something that might be helpful. So sleight of hand. Gotcha. That's gonna be right.
Flying hand. The rogue's great reach. Quite a hand with advantage.
All right, so Nyx is going to
And
close her eyes. She's going, okay. Deep breath. She's going to pull out another vial of this golden syrup kind of liquid, and she's going to drink it. And it's Nyx's magical, Nyx's fixer elixir, which is basically enhance ability. So she's going
you
to.
have advantage already.
Yeah.
Why did I spend so much time thinking of that? I'll save that for another time. So she's gonna guard
Well,
herself.
I can withdraw
Sorry for
my
all
help
that.
if
I
you want.
literally said.
She said, yeah, no. I just got a bit lost
And
in
you
my
have
thoughts.
guidance. I literally said all of this.
Yes, that's right. It's very wrong. Sorry, I was just so fixed on doing that, but it's
No
just
worries.
out of my hand.
He was trying to give himself the best possible outcome and didn't actually.
It would have been the same plan.
Yeah.
Nah, it's terrible. I'm gonna re-roll that.
Oh.
2.
With advantage as well.
Actually, it would have been. Sorry, it's because my sheet says disadvantage because of the armor, but it's because I forgot that as a.
In this case,
As a-
no.
It isn't anyway because she has a thing as an artificer that bypasses that.
Ah.
I forgot. That's fine. Oh, cool. 16. Let's do a d4.
Nice.
Okay. 19 and then plus 2, so yeah. 21.
Yeah, it's good work. You
Very.
with Cinder's help, you managed to do what you wanted to do, and as you test it, functional. And
She smiles.
as you guys finish it up and are pretty much about ready to leave to watch the fight,
Yeah.
because you're not going to take the
Balloon
balloon there. You're going to watch the fight first and come back here to take the person on the parade.
We're not going to test fly it?
No.
No. So, you know, the Admiral seems pleased with the work he's seen you do. And you guys hear the especially Lorcan, and you hear the very familiar trumpets of the announcement of the games.
Guys, we need to hurry.
Wait, they
yeah,
haven't
I need-
paid us yet.
The game's starting.
And you
She's
know
like-
that you're probably not going to get the best seats at this time.
Oh, I will force my
Um,
points.
She Nyx has wiped, like, used a little toilet to, like, clean herself up. She goes, Nexus, where's your mother? I have something for her.
Nexus is not with you. He went to
No.
buy food.
He's not here? Where would she needs to fly? She needs to get to
Probably
Accra
at the
before the
stadium
flight.
now.
Yeah, she'll be in the stadium preparing. You won't be able to get to her.
Okay.
Nexus,
Sweet.
Nexus, sure, but you see that Larkin, when you see Nick's looking like stressed, if you tell him that you wanted to see Accra, he'll tell you like no one gets to that at this point.
No.
we're staff.
Alright, that's...
Okay.
Would have done
I
things
think
differently
you
if I'd
would-
known that. But that was on me for not asking.
What did you want to do?
He had something for her for the fight.
Explain.
Give it. No, she basically made the elixir. She wanted to give it to her, and she wanted to also, in case this man is gonna do something dodgy, she was gonna also give her like an ointment that would give her protection from poisons and all that. That's
Okay.
all she wanted to give her.
You know you can't take potions. You can only take your weapons
Where that's it.
to the fights. You can't
Have fun.
have potions. You can only take or scrolls or anything. You can only take the weapons.
You're not allowed anything like that, I'm afraid. It's only weapons allowed.
You
But then
wouldn't
how
have
is he able to use?
No potions, no scrolls, no.
That's why he's
Spells.
That's why he says he's cheating because he used spells and things that he shouldn't have.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Now, if you have counterspell at the ready, that would be very good.
It's not that big.
The Cinder's like,
But Cinder, you know how to dispel magic, so it's all on you then.
I was thinking protection from poison, but I don't have it.
She did. Nyx has it, but if she can't
it's
use
only
it,
for 10 minutes though, right?
nope, it's an hour.
It's an hour.
It's an hour.
You
But
would've had
we can't
to
because she
be
wouldn't
late.
accept it.
And not just that, you would have been late to watch the start of the fight because you would have had to go to all the way to the arena before like finishing your work. You're just finishing in time.
Never
I have a
mind.
question. Can we cast it as she's walking out?
You can. What's the range? Is it touch?
Yeah.
I'm
believe so,
sorry.
yeah.
I get that you're upset, but there are certain things you
No,
can't
it's
do.
fine. It's the way it is.
You
That's
can always
what we
throw a
collected.
potion at her.
Because that's she'll be the one getting called a cheater if I did that.
Why don't we frame the other one for cheating?
Yes, why not?
If we give the other one help, that person will lose.
Aye. This is what we're gonna have to try.
You're gonna have to just hope that your mother, or Nexus's mother, is up for the task.
And
Maybe
hopefully
she's more prepared this time. Maybe I'm not giving her enough credit. Just
Are
wanted
we
to
at
help.
the stadium now?
Yeah, you're making your way to the stadium. Larkin, you said you wanted to try to find good seats.
Yes.
How are you planning to do that?
Because
It's
next
already
is the
pre-scheduled.
unstable.
Tell me if you want 100.
Oh. Do 100.
If we buy tickets, can we prestidigitate it so that they say it's front row?
11.
Sure.
Damn, he saved us some seats. Yes. Which row?
Pretty much at the front.
He got VIP because he's their son.
No, you don't.
Their son VIP box. Come on.
No, the VIP box is only for the count.
I know.
So, yeah, you get in and you see that both of them are already in the arena. I'm bringing you to. Oh, the map looked better quality when I set it up first.
I think it's just not loaded.
Hope so.
Sometimes it takes its time.
It's full, and yeah, they're already in the arena as the
Oh, wow.
announcer.
Accra, Accra, Accra.
The announcer starts welcoming everyone and saying, announcing the fight and the circumstances of this fight, which are very unusual.
Rematch.
And with that, I'm gonna leave it there for today.
Oh,
Next time, you will watch the fight, and we'll do your parade
Yay.
and whatever else you guys get up to.
yeah, it's gonna be good. Can't wait.
All right. This time, the fight is not gonna be me handing you sheets to play with, but you will definitely have an effect on it.
Oh, great. I'm gonna be throwing my weapon in if she needs it.
Weapons you're allowed to throw in.
Oh, you are? Even magical
Weapons?
ones?
Well, yeah, because their weapons usually are magical.
Hell yes.
You're just not allowed to throw in anything. Weapons is the only thing allowed.
Okay. So if we buy a bunch of javelins and throw them into the bad guy and accidentally stab him,
And you would be arrested and the file would be called off. You're allowed to throw them into the pitch, just not at the people.
Oh, I would. Yeah.
So, thank you everybody for watching. It's been
Thank you.
fun. We're actually getting close to leaving Carolyn, so we're approaching the end, I think, soon. Who knows with these guys?
Who knows?
Who knows? It might be 5 sessions. It might be another year.
Yeah.
We never know. But thank you everybody for being here and watching us. Again, we have an amazing community on Discord, so join our Discord. There are going to be some games coming up. I believe we have Belvedere's Elemental Chaos on Friday morning, 10 a.m. EST on the Discord. We believe we don't have School or Strahd, but on Monday I believe we have Dragonlance. Do we not?
yes, we do.
And we return with Fort Frostmaiden on Tuesday. Next week there will be no Legends of Methis. So it's our week off. We go back to our normal schedule. But yeah, there's several games coming up. There will be a one-shot Sunday as well. So keep your eyes out because there's a bunch of stuff happening on the server. So join our Discord to get all of that. And don't forget to check out Awesome, the shop, because it's
Awesome.
it's awesome. It's incredible. And the code will only be active after the 1st of October. But check them out anyway and start picking out what you would like to buy and all that stuff because they're really cool people. So, yeah. Thanks everybody for watching and see you all next week.
Thank you. Bye.